What's going on, everybody? Happy Friday. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets powered by FTN right here on Game Plus Network. Also live on our FTN Network YouTube page. Chris Meaney here with you. Appreciate you guys hanging out. Hopefully you enjoyed the football game last night and you're off to a decent start in what is the first week of your fantasy football playoffs. Yesterday, it went how really we thought it would go. When Brian jumped on the show, we talked about the Niners winning and we talked about them covering, and we had the under as well. And the two props that we had from yesterday worked out perfectly for us. We had George Kittle over 2.5 grabs, actually over 3.5 grabs, and we had him for over 38.5 receiving yards. And he popped off. He had the 2 touchdowns. Man, he's so good. He's just so good. And I think that's why people get a little frustrated with George Kittle because, he's known as a really good blocker. I mean, he does a lot of good things really well. But it's nice to see when he gets targets and he's in the open field and he's just avoiding tackles and taking it to the house. And I love his touchdown celebrations. I just love everything about George Kittle. He's such an amazing player. Popped off yesterday, 93 yards, had the 2 touchdowns, as I mentioned, on 4 catches. And then Christian McCaffrey had a massive day. We did not touch any props for McCaffrey. We did mention his catching prop at plus money 4.5 was pretty enticing. He ended up with 32 touches, a season high 32 touches for him, 108 yards on the ground, had a touchdown, 26 carries, and he had 6 grabs for 30 receiving yards. So those were the 2 big players for the 49ers. The defense continues to ball out. They played fantastic yesterday. I'm still a little sour because I have the Niners defense in a lot of spots, and just what is up with these roughing the passer penalties? What was wrong with the play that Bosa had on Geno yesterday? I don't think anything. What was wrong with that play? He just tackled him. He didn't throw him down. He didn't, jump at his head or his knees. I thought it was just a nice tackle. The Niners had the return pick for a touchdown. Yes, I'm bitter. I need those points in my fantasy matchup. I really wanted them. And there was another pick where the Niners almost got in. Actually, it was the fumble. I think it was the Travis Homer fumble where the Niners they ended up bringing it down close to the goal line, and then CMC had that touchdown. But block party, Burke party, Purdy, he continues to, I call him block party, of course, and he continues to impress me as well. I mean, it's all about coaching in the NFL. We've seen this so many times, and we stressed it a lot on this show, right? Trevor Lawrence, the Urban Meyer, what? Trevor Lawrence this year with Doug Peterson, hello, right? We are seeing, not only is he a top 12 fantasy quarterback, we've seen some really nice games from last year's number 1 overall pick in Trevor Lawrence, when last year he looked just awful. And was it all on him? No, it wasn't. The offensive line wasn't great. The play calling was atrocious. We're seeing it much better in Jacksonville. Same thing, in Philly a few years ago when they brought in Frank Reich with the play calling, the head coaching. I think about Daniel Jones this year with Brian Daboll, right? He's having one of his better seasons in terms of completion percentage. He's been a very accurate quarterback this year, more so in years past. Credit to Daboll. Daniel Jones, of course, not a lot of weapons there. And then Kyle Shanahan, right? It's Trey Lance, no. Jimmy G, no. And now we're getting into Purdy here as a 3rd-string quarterback, Mr. Irrelevant. How about the one play, like the fake, the turnaround and the fake, and then in the middle of the field, Kittle? Like, that was just, it was so beautiful. And it's coaching. Like, Purdy, great. Like, he had another good game. He's been accurate. He's making some really nice plays and some nice throws, and the Niners are perfect with him under center. And we talked about the Niners still being a legitimate Super Bowl contender because of that championship run that they made. Well, they lost in the Super Bowl in 2019, but in that first 2 games against the Vikings and against the Packers, I think it was like 28 pass attempts. In that final game, I think it was 9 pass attempts in that conference championship game where they just ran the rock. And you saw yesterday, they ran the rock with CMC. Got Mason sprinkled in, had the long run towards the end of that game. Even without Debo, they didn't miss a beat. Seattle's not an easy place to go play football. It's a divisional matchup. Seattle's had some really nice games. Pete Carroll's had some solid games against the Niners. Really, he's had Shanahan's number over the past few years. So Niners rolled. We did have the Geno over 33.5 pass attempts. He had 44 pass attempts yesterday. So it was a perfect day for us football-wise. We're not going to pat ourselves in the back. There's still a lot of football to be played. We have the 3 Saturday games and a ton of action on Sunday. The biggest news today, I guess, from that game would be Tyler Lockett. Reports that he diagnosed with a broken right index finger. So he is questionable to play the rest of the year. And what a season he has had in terms of just real life and a fantasy season as well, as a top 12 wide receiver. I went up against him in a couple of spots and I was thinking, he may not do a whole lot. And he ends up having a pretty decent day. 14 points, I think, from a PPR setting. Doesn't find the end zone, but not bad. I think Lockett owners and DK owners, even Kenneth Walker owners, have to be just pleased with what they got because it could have been a whole lot worse from them. We will answer your starter sit questions. We have Scott Spratt joining the show today. Fantastic. I really enjoyed my conversation with him a couple weeks ago on his podcast, and he joined the show as well. I know this is a big week for a lot of people, and we've been sharing some of our FTN projections over at ftnfantasy.com. We did quarterbacks the other day. I believe yesterday we touched on running backs. Today we'll take a look at wide receivers. And Garrett Wilson, of course, Elijah Moore. These are questions that people are going to have about these two wide receivers because Mike White is not going to play this week against the Detroit Lions. It is going to be Zach Wilson under center. And what I have seen from the Jets when Zach Wilson is under center, they just really want to run the rock. Earlier in the season when Joe Flacco was under center, he was chucking, he's throwing like a crazy lunatic. I was at one of the games, he had like 55 pass attempts. I was at that game against the Bengals. He's just chucking. So you want, they scale back. Guys like Garrett Wilson too, like Garrett Wilson in games without Zach, this guy's averaging close to 12 targets per game. In games with Zach, he's averaging 7 targets. A very small sample, but Zach hasn't shown us a whole lot. So I think we have to downgrade everybody, honestly, in this offense. Maybe we uptick Bam Knight just a little bit. Maybe they lean on the run a little bit more. Michael Carter sprinkled in just a touch more. But that is the biggest news here today, that no Mike White. So when we bring up the quarterback projections with Scott, we will address that. Going to bring up all the projections with him. Going to touch on quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, start and sit, guys in good spots, in tough spots. So now is the time, guys, to get your questions in. I see some surfacing on Twitter here live on our FTN Network YouTube page as well. And if you have any other ones, you can always tag Scott or myself, Scott_Spratt. He's just hanging by. He's going to be here in a couple. And then at Chris Meaney here as well. But check out his article. Very detailed. He runs through a lot of players, to be honest with you, in his starter sit article. Talks about the weather and, what the game script could be like in each particular game. And we will dive into all of that as well. I have some picks against the spread, some totals, a parlay, a teaser that can't lose for Daily Handle, who is in the house. Can't lose teaser, bud. This one's for you. And we do have some props as well. Only 3 games on the ice in the NHL. As of right now, I don't even have a pick, which is weird because you guys know I always have picks. And yesterday was pretty good for us as well in the NHL. We had Patrick Kane, we had Mitch Marner, we had Cole Caulfield for shots, we had Crosby for an assist. It was a pretty decent day. It could have been a lot better. Not going to lie, but we did have some positive units in the NHL. So in the final block, maybe I'll take a look at the slate. It's only a 3-game slate, mostly football today to help you guys get set for your quarterfinal matchup and hopefully win a little bit of cash in the NFL. Leaving in the house, go Sharks. Olave versus Garrett Wilson. These are questions that we have. I have, and we will address all of them. Scott Spratt is in here next. But first, 12 days of Christmas. This is day number 3. We're just giving stuff away. Tis the season. Tis the season for giving. And sharing and drinking eggnog with spiced rum. 30% off first year of FTN Fantasy Platinum. Promo code XSmith3. FTN Fantasy Platinum. Listen, football is kind of over. FTNdaily.com/free, FTNbets.com/free. You want to get into DFS, your season-long leagues are over. We're here for you. We're going to have a streaming show on Friday. Today, we'll have a show on Sunday. Next week, we'll take care of you as well. Saturday action in the NFL, a lot of Saturday action next week as Christmas falls on Sunday. There are a couple games on Sunday, but there's a lot of action on Saturday. If you're looking to be part of the DFS family, hang out, some DFS stuff. But that Platinum package, pretty good as well, especially if you're a baseball fan. The fantasy baseball package, I do believe it will be. Don't quote me. All my content will be done this weekend. And Vlad's got a lot done. I mean, Vlad is going to crush this guide like he did last year. We have a lot of great people, putting their time and efforts into the guide and have their handprints all over it as well. But I do believe you'll look for that fantasy football or fantasy baseball draft kit coming your way early next week. So 30% off. Save yourself a little bit of cash. Draft's already happening. And that's what we do over at FTN. We cover all the sports for you all the time. But one thing that kills and tops all is the NFL. And Scott is in here next. And we're going to touch on some of those tough decisions that you may have as we continue here. Week 15 got underway yesterday. We're going to take a look at all the matchups here with Scott Spratt. Hang tight. Lots to get to here on Mean Streets.
At DraftKings Sportsbook, You can bet on nearly any sport imaginable: the NFL, the NBA, college football, college basketball, golf, the NHL, tennis, Major League Baseball, MMA, and more. Download the DK Sportsbook app on iOS and Android operating systems, as well as on your desktops or in mobile browsers. Get the best bonuses using promo code FTN. Remember, the only way to gamble responsibly is to win. Prize Picks is a creative new way to parlay picks based on expected fantasy point production and single stat projections. You pick 2 to 5 players and predict if they'll go over or under their projected fantasy point total or their single stat total. When parlaying the players, the larger your parlay, the better the payout. A 2-pick entry pays 3x. A 3-pick entry pays 5x. A 4-pick entry pays 10x. As a bonus offer, there's a flex play option. This provides an added level of security on your entry where you can decrease your multiplier received if you miss one of your entries, but hit on all the others. At FTN, we have Prize Picks coverage for every sport in both article and standalone pick format on our Prize Picks pick tracker. Use promo code FTN for a 100% deposit match on your first deposit of up to $100.
Welcome back in as we welcome in Scott Spratt of FTN Fantasy. On the Twitter machine, you see there Scott_Spratt. He is the host of Advanced Stats, and he does a lot of fantastic work for us over at FTN Fantasy. A start and sit article, pace and calling report over at FTN Daily. You got your hands in absolutely everything, Scott. Of course, your rankings can be found over at FTNFantasy.com. You do a nice, fun article I love to read every single week. Touchdown luck. Where's the luck? Unlucky and lucky guys scoring touchdowns. And I think last time we chatted, we mentioned Joe Mixon, how he had been unlucky, and then I think he popped off for like 4 touchdowns. I think one of those games, and
I think you can fully credit me for Mixon having the 5 touchdowns in the one game. You're welcome,
and I will credit you for that. You were all over it. Scott, I wanted to touch on, quarterbacks and running backs and wide receivers with you this week and answer some start and sit questions. Of course, this is a big week. It's a must-win week for everybody.
That's right. Yeah.
Week 15, always important, right? I love those questions you get. Got to win this week, Scott. So, really dive into the analysis and make sure you give me the correct answer here. But I think we should start with the biggest news of the day, and it's Mike White. And it's Mike White who's not going to start, and it's Zach Wilson who's going to get the start. And I feel like when I watch Zach Wilson under center, they just don't let him chuck. It's more of a run-heavy team. I think the heartbeat of this offense is really their run game, and it's been a lot different since Breece Hall has left. But saw a couple nice things from Zonovan Knight over the past couple of weeks. A matchup here against Detroit. A lot of people were talking about Elijah Moore as a potential guy that they could start this week, and Garrett Wilson, who's been really good, especially with Mike White under center. Now with this news, obviously you're going to be finding another quarterback and you're not going to Zach, but let's just talk about the 2 wide receivers. Like, are you downgrading them that much to the point where you would sit Garrett Wilson this week?
I mean, I'm probably not going to sit Wilson, not in a league where you have a flex option, but I think it makes a really big difference. Zach Wilson's averaged 27 pass attempts per game this year. Mike White's over 40. Flacco's over 40. I mean, it's basically cutting your pass attempts in half, and I don't care how efficient and how effective Wilson is. I just think the opportunities aren't going to be there in the same way. So I am downgrading him. I will say that it helps that you're playing the Lions. That's a team that pushes pace a little bit and also is a big booster of expecting passing touchdowns. Maybe it can work out in that respect, but you're certainly not going to start Elijah Moore now, right? Even if assuming Corey Davis sits, I think I maybe had him 40th or 41st, but there's no way he's in any kind of non-deep league lineup now. It's kind of a shame, but maybe it's good for Wilson to have a chance to rehab his career. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'd say a chance. I don't know if he'll, take advantage of that opportunity, but I'd say it's definitely a chance for him. If he can have a good game and he can win this game, maybe he is next week's starter as well, is because, of course, they're in the thick of things. Both teams are. Who would have thought, Scott, week 15, a matchup between the Jets and the Lions, so much on the line for both teams?
It's true. I mean, I've been a huge Dan Campbell advocate since the original press conference.
Of
It's
course.
actually funny. I wrote a whole story about it back for my previous employer, and like went through that press conference where he went crazy and said that he was going to bite kneecaps off. He actually made a lot of compelling points that weren't quite so laughable in that, and so I've been a big fan of him ever since. Maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid, but I like Campbell. I think it shows how much his players respect and want to play for him, that this turnaround is happening.
Yeah, and I think we're all drinking the Kool-Aid just a little bit. So the questions that have surfaced so far have been around Garrett Wilson. Kyle Woods is in the house. Is how much do we ding Garrett Wilson now that Zach Wilson is quarterback one? I had him over Olave, Rashad
Mhm.
White, Jeff Wilson, and Stevenson. We'll keep an eye. It doesn't sound like Ramondre is going to play this week. And then Lee Ving also in the house always gets his "Oh Sharks" comment in there, SJ boy. But then he also has the same question, right? Olave or Garrett Wilson here in a half-point setting. I agree with you what you talk about Garrett. I don't think you sit Garrett. I think you still play him. I do believe he's the number one good spot, as you mentioned, against Detroit. The volume still should be there, even though in games without
Yeah.
Zach, it's like almost 12 targets. In games with Zach, it's down to roughly 7. Would you play Olave over Garrett Wilson in this spot?
I would. I'm still making on the full update to the projection side of things, but just kind of looking where I was. I mean, I had Wilson way up inside my top 20, feeling pretty good about him. Just looking at it, I had Mike Evans 23rd. I'd rather start Evans. I'd rather start Christian Watt. I'd start Michael Pittman, who's averaged basically 9 targets per game this season. To me, it's the Juju Smith-Schuster area of like the mid to late 20s when I might start looking at Wilson instead. With Judy specifically, he has a lot more touchdowns than expected touchdowns this season. Obviously scored 3 last week. It kind of boosts you up there, but I feel like he's been lucky to be as effective as he is. I think that's probably the area where I would want to start Garrett Wilson. And again, that's in a typical league, that's in the flex range where you're going to be looking to start him, but it's not what he was before.
No, not at all. Daily Handle, we'll get to running backs maybe in the next block. I wanted to share some of our projections with you. We'll be doing this all week. And of course, Scott, you can see them, but the viewers and on Game Plus and here are viewers on our YouTube page and the listeners on iTunes, I'll kind of share, read off a couple of them. But Tyler, if you want to just chuck up quarterbacks here for now, I mean, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, I have Hurts ranked 1. I mean, we're splitting hairs, whatever. Like Hurts, for me, it's Hurts, Mahomes, Allen, but you're starting Allen no matter what. I think people may have some questions about, as Mike White will get rid of him. Of course, like the projections will be updated today. Once we hear all this news, guys, Scott will have his rankings updated. I will do them. We'll refresh, of course, on Sunday morning, like we always do. Ratcliffe is his rankings there as well. So these projections will be slightly updated. Of course, Gino played last night. I have Trevor Lawrence ranked a little bit higher than some of these guys. Like I had him ranked ahead of Tua and Gino and Mike White. I kind of like him, just like what I've seen from him lately. But I think the biggest question people have maybe surrounded around Tua and potentially this Saturday game. Well, it is Saturday in Buffalo and potentially snow. Anywhere from maybe 10 inches of snow, possibly. I know you wrote in your article, I think you gave like a 63% chance of snow. It does sound like there's going to be some sort of snow in Buffalo. Tua, Waddle, we can sprinkle these guys in. What are you doing? If you had Trevor Lawrence, would you play Tua over him? Would you play Deshaun Watson over him? Jared Goff's in a tough spot. Like, what are you doing with Tua? Because Miami's offense has looked a little stale over the past couple of weeks, Scott.
I mean, it has. Tua's gone, 295, 2-2 in San Francisco, 75% or 55% completion rate, 145, 1-0 in LA last week against the Chargers, 36%. Hilariously used the space heaters on the sideline, which I think probably does bode kind of poorly for the trip to Buffalo. I'm going to steal this from Brian DeArdo of CBS Sports, but he kind of compiled what Tua had done in his professional career in his coldest games. Those were in 2020 and 2021 at the Broncos, the Bills again at the Titans. It's not super pretty. You got an 83-yard passing day, a 205-yard passing day, another 205, one day with 351, but threw 3 picks, has 4 total picks in those 4 games. The thing about it is that like when you start drawing those splits and like looking at the specifics, I think it gets really tricky, especially with someone like Tua taking a step forward this year with, the new offense with Mike McDaniel. It's just like saying that like Tua has played better this year than his cold games from the last 2 years. I don't know. I'm not ready to totally draw those lines. I'm not as much worried about the efficiency, frankly. Like I know that Tagovailoa has very effectively gone downfield to Tyreek Hill so far this season, but Hill and Waddle are so fast that they're great after the catch too. So if they go to a shorter pass offense, I think that's going to work and that's going to be effective too. The major concern for me is just that teams tend to, in really cold weather and in snow, shift their play calling away from the pass and towards the run. And so I think it's maybe more of a volume thing. It's kind of the Zach Wilson part of this, where it's like, what happens if Tua only throws the ball 25 times? He may not be quite the fantasy asset that he normally would be. And that's why I have him. I think I have him, 11th this week? Yeah. It's not like you're definitely not starting him, but it's a drop to me. And it's probably a situation at least where you're not running to start him in DFS everywhere.
I want to give a shout out to Cameron Wolf too, who follows Miami pretty closely, and listen to this tweet that he had. It says Dolphins practicing in their indoor facility today with the AC blasting as cold as it would go. Felt like it was in the 50s or low 60s. Definitely not Buffalo temperatures, but better prep than the 80 degrees and currently is inside the Miami Gardens facility. I just thought that was hilarious. You can blast the AC all you want. You're never going to prepare yourself for weather in Buffalo. There's no chance. You can't sit Tyreek. I suppose if you're, in a really good spot, maybe you can move off of Jalen Waddle because he hasn't been that great over the past couple of weeks. But even his ceiling, Scott, I mean, it's just so significant. I just feel like, man, if I sat Jalen Waddle and this guy went off, it's not like T. Higgins, where T. Higgins, you just don't know if this guy's going to be questioned. Is he going to play? Is he going to be active? And if he is active, is he getting out there and playing? At least Waddle's on the field and he's playing. And we know his ceiling. It's so high. Even if it is a snow game, he could still, pop off for you, give you at least wide receiver 2 numbers this weekend.
Yeah, I definitely think he can. The trick of it is that when it's snowing, the offensive player knows where he's trying to go and the defensive player doesn't. So it's not always as beneficial for the defense on a per play basis for it to be bad weather. It can help the offense too. The problem is, again, if the Dolphins don't throw the ball enough, everybody may fall short of their numbers. But wouldn't it all be surprised for Waddle or Hill to be streaking down the sidelines being like, where's his defender? He's wide open. Oh, he fell. He fell in the snow.
We've seen it a couple times in the snow games, right? Former Bills running back and Eagles running back, LaShawn McCoy, in a snow game at the Link one year against the Lions. Nothing happened at all in that first half. And then all of a sudden they decided to run the ball, which they should have been the game plan. And to your point, the defenders had no idea. I think definitely advantage offense when it comes out. Let's bring up the quarterbacks one more time and kind of dig a little bit deeper. I suppose for those that are in super flex leagues, Tom Brady hasn't done a whole lot this season. Deshaun Watson is I thought he dusted off a little bit more of the rust last week. A matchup here against the Ravens in what is a very, very low total. We have Jared Goff. I'm sure you're well aware of the splits. We've talked a lot about them so far this season. I think 20-3 touchdown interception ratio at home and just 2 touchdowns on the road. And just one touchdown this season outdoors. Like one of them came on the road in a dome. I think that one was against the Minnesota Vikings. Deeper down the list, Brock Purdy again had a nice game. I don't know. Maybe we need to rewind time and bump him up just a little bit in our projections. But Daniel Jones has got a good spot here against the Raiders. Mac Jones against the Raiders. But I just have a hard time rolling him out. There's a lot of wide receivers that are questionable in that matchup. Derek Carr against Bill. I don't know. On the right side of the board, is there a quarterback that you're like, you know what? I kind of like them this week, and I may play them as a number 2 in Superflex. And Lee says, where's Colt McCoy? He's not on the list, Lee.
He's a little further down. I guess he's on page 3. I'll say with Mac Jones, like with Jared Goff, Mac Jones is another player that's shown really extreme home road splits in his career, something that you don't expect as much from a player that plays at home, not in a dome stadium, especially up in the cold in New England. But Jones has been more effective at home than on the road. So even though the Raiders are a nice matchup there, I'm not dying to start him this week. Certainly not dying to start Jared Goff. By the way, Goff had really extreme home road splits with the touchdowns and picks last year too. This isn't a one-year deal. He's one of the extreme guys in that respect. Let me go back to Tom Brady. I know I'm a little over-obsessed with the expected touchdowns, but Brady's thrown 17 touchdowns this year, but 25.1 opportunity-adjusted passing touchdowns. That's top 5 among all quarterbacks. He's got the biggest touchdown shortfall over his expectations at 8.1. What all that is saying, attempts in the red zones on the field where other players in the league with league average rates tend to score touchdowns, and it just hasn't happened for whatever reason so far this season. quarterbacks can be responsible for that if they're just making bad throws. I mean, Trevor Lawrence was the biggest touchdown shortfall guy last year. And I think we can safely blame the bad coaching where wide receivers weren't running where they were supposed to be and they weren't completing passes right. I don't think that's the problem with Brady so far this season. And frankly, I think a lot of it has just been really bad luck. He's still getting rid of the ball quickly. So I think that neutralizes some of the offensive line concerns. Brady is still top 10 in all of the like advanced efficiency metrics, like passing DVOA. To me, a lot of it's going well, and it's just really bad luck with the touchdowns. And I think it's turning. I know it didn't look that way against the 49ers last week, but the 49ers are maybe the best defense in football, as you know.
Legit.
The 3 weeks before that, he had thrown 2 touchdowns in each of those 3 games. I'm still buying in. I still think he's a top 10 quarterback. I'm ranking ahead of Tua Tagovailoa this week. Definitely have him well ahead of Jared Goff this week. 2 quarterbacks, well, at least Goff that's way hotter, and then Tua has been the better player for the season. But I'm still buying into Tom Brady. It's just I'm going to probably die before he does, and that's when I'll stop assuming that he's going to be a really good quarterback.
Tyler says Brady's going to make another Super Bowl run this year, isn't he? He's going to make another one. He's going to hey, listen, if the Bucs get in, and I think they will, I mean, these next couple games, even if they don't win them, it's going to be all about the way that they wrap up against the Panthers and I think the Falcons on the schedule as well. I mean, Carolina actually holds their own destiny, their own fate. Like if they
We're
can
going to
win
get Mason Rudolph this week, and it's just upsetting. We're going to win again. I wanted a top draft pick to get a quarterback, and no, we're going to win the division at like 7-10.
You might win the division. I mean, you already crushed Tom Brady and the Bucs earlier this season. You may just win the division, which would be just crazy. And then you not only win you'd host can you imagine? The NFL is bonkers. There's always it's crazy things that happen, but Carolina hosting a playoff game is not one that I could ever imagine would have happened heading into the start of the season. Before we wrap up from quarterbacks, we do have a couple people in the house. I did want to get to Evans. I don't know. I can kind of tie it in here now. I don't really have a whole lot to say besides the fact that maybe some of that unluckiness from Brady is part. Evans' air yards are always there for him. Targets. He has 3 touchdowns on the season. He hasn't scored since week 4, I believe. The volume has been there. It seems like every single week there's some targets down the field too. So, I mean, if you have Evans, don't shy away and get too cute. I would play him this week. I still think he's a solid wide receiver 2. We know he has the upside to be a wide receiver 1. Albert's in the house and he's in trouble, and he's telling us, I'm in trouble. He finds out Mike White is ruled out, and he didn't start Purdy last night based on the questionable status. And he said in another comment, Mike White, quote, ready to roll. Yeah, right. He's ticked off. So we got to dig a little bit deeper. Would you roll out Matt Ryan at all? Can we bring this back up, Tyler? Just the projections. You know, the Vikings, 7 of the last 8 games, they've allowed a 300-yard passer, the most passing yards in football, the most yards per attempt in football. I know that Jonathan Taylor is the heartbeat of this offense. And, you know, since he's been back and they made the coaching change with Jeff Saturday, it has been a run-heavy offense. I mean, 20-plus touches, I think, is what you can expect. But maybe he throws a touchdown or 2 here. Like, Albert, is Ryan available? Would you go Ryan, or would you go Andy Dalton, or would you go Tyler Haneke, or would you go Ryan Tannehill? Like, let's choose between one of those 4 that I think are out there for people in single quarterback leagues.
They are. This is hilarious. I have Matt Ryan ranked 20th. He's the highest of that mix. Somebody that I would be starting in a 2 quarterback league. I know you hate to do it. Like, Ryan looks extremely washed up, but the fact is that fantasy football is different from real football, right? And there's 2 major things that are in Ryan's advantage this week. One is that he's playing a really good offense in the Vikings. That means if Ryan ends up falling behind in this game, he's going to throw a lot to catch up. And we've seen Ryan average, I think, close to 40 pass attempts this season. And kind of volume his way to some fantasy relevant days, even if the efficiency isn't really there, even if he's turning the ball over from time to time, even if he finally lets Jonathan Taylor score some touchdowns near the goal line. I think that could all potentially help there. Meanwhile, and this is true every December, I feel like, but is very true this year, just a lot of landmine situations in fantasy football. I'd say Ryan Tannehill's a good one of those. Hugely extreme home road splits over the last few seasons with the Titans. Not a player that I'm ever going to want to start on the road. Some of these other guys have major weather concerns. Taylor Heineke, I think it's supposed to be below freezing in Washington on Monday night. It's night. It's going to be cold. There are a lot of guys playing outdoors with bad weather this week that I think makes it really hard to trust them. So give me the old man Ryan, at least in the nice air-conditioned, comfortable confines in Minnesota. I think it's bad.
I dig it. I dig it. I like it. I think you brought up a good point too. Something that I wasn't really even considering because the Vikings are going to be able to score some points. I mean, they're scoring points a lot, and then they're giving it up. So maybe they get away from the run just a little bit. Lee, Colt McCoy, man, if you want to do it, that's all you, dude. Go ahead, man. Denver Broncos defense. I'm not totally into it. Albert says his options were Dalton, Huntley, Darnold, Heineke, Ritter, Pittick, Mayfield, Ryan, all available. You agree Ryan is still the guy for you? Out of those few, or Huntley maybe with a little bit of rushing upside there?
Yeah, say Huntley's the only one that like piques my interest a little bit, but I'm still starting Ryan. I think part of the concern there too is that Huntley, a little bit of health concerns, Pickett, not 100% sure he's going to be playing this week. So I think there's some situations there where you may not want to start the player too, because what happens if they can't complete the game?
Yeah, exactly. Tyler Brady, man, we don't want it. We don't want to see it, but he is saying that they're going to face the Cowboys. Brock Purdy, primetime Kirk, walk into the Super Bowl. Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe luck will break Tom's way. That he has been totally unlucky over the course of his career. But so far this season, according to Scott, and I do agree. Scott, let's take a break and we'll dive. Unlucky in love. Yeah, you're right. It's been a rocky year for Tom Brady for sure. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll dive into some running backs as well. Keep the questions coming. Albert, good luck with the quarterback decision. Hopefully Matt Ryan. All you need is like 15, 16 points, right? Matt Ryan, and hopefully the rest of your team is pretty solid. I think there's room for potentially a couple more. Maybe he hooks up with Pittman in the end zone, maybe once or twice. We'll break and we'll touch on running backs. Got some wide receivers to take a look at as well. Keep her locked. Mean Streets continues here on Game Plus Network. Welcome back in. Mean Streets here live on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney with Scott Spratt, host of Advanced Stats. Check it out for free on iTunes, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to your favorite podcasts. We are going to get into running backs since we do have a tight end question. We weren't really going to dive into tight ends. It's not a Jeff Driscoll question, Scott. I did see him picked up in a lot of my Yahoo leagues. I don't know if anyone's going to play him. Maybe just blocking. We'll see what happens there this weekend. It is Pat Freiermuth versus David Njoku, who had a nice game in his first full game with Deshaun Watson last week. I don't know if we have any news on Deontay Johnson. He was a surprise, did not practice yesterday after he got a full practice in on Wednesday, dealing with a hip. I think I lean Freiermuth anyways, but if there's no Deontay here in this matchup, I think you got to like Pat Freiermuth here, right? If it's just him and Pickens against your Panthers, what do you think between him and Njoku?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would start Freiermuth over Njoku pretty much every week. I think there's just a little bit of a volume difference there where Freiermuth is getting about 20% of the targets every week. That's just something that you don't normally see from a tight end. And for me, that's the way to go, even though I'd say, relatively speaking, he may have the slightly more difficult matchup. I just don't think that matters as much for tight ends as it does for wide receivers or running backs.
Fair point. We only got about 10 minutes with you, Scott. I don't want to take up too much of your time. So we'll touch on running backs, maybe if you can hang on for one more segment, and we'll do wide receivers. So let's bring up the projections for running backs. Of course, we don't have to spend too much time on this board. I think, you're starting those guys, even people with Kamara. Kamara owners may be watching the show like, listen, I'm not even going to make the playoffs because I drafted Kamara so early. Or maybe you are going to make the playoffs. The rest of your team is awesome. Maybe a bounce back performance here from Alvin. We touched on the difference between Alvin this year and years past. It isn't that much in terms of usage through the air. Of course, it's not like when he broke into the league in his first 4 seasons, he had 80 plus grabs, but he's just not doing a whole lot on the ground. He's not getting a lot of carries. And of course, you have Taysom Hill there, who could steal some touches. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Tyler, let's go to page number 2 here with some of these running backs. So Pacheco, as his Chiefs, in a really good spot. We saw the big game from Jerick McKinnon last week. And just like down the board here, you got both Detroit backs. Deesh is always in the house, and he's battling with himself and which Detroit back to potentially play. Deontay Foreman there. No logo, but we know he's with the Panthers, and he's going to go up against the Steelers. We got Zonovan Knight there. Maybe a few more touches, Scott. Maybe you project him for a few more touches, with Zach Wilson under center, Latavius as well. Like, what do you make of that grouping? Like Latavius, Zonovan Knight, Deontay Foreman, these Detroit backs. I'm a fan of Brian Robinson. You can tell me he stinks, and I wouldn't listen to you, Scott. I'm playing him. But what do you make of some of these running backs towards the bottom of this list? Like, who jumps off of the page to you as in a good spot, and you like them this week?
Well, I mean, Brian Robinson does in a good spot, so I do like him. I'm not going to tell you not to start him. This may not be a good spot, but like with Zonovan Knight, I think he's the most interesting for a couple of reasons. One, with the quarterback switch. To me, I think that's a mistake that people make, assuming that, hey, getting a worse quarterback means they're going to run the ball more. Good quarterbacks create more rushing opportunities for the running backs because they can extend drives and create new plays. Plus, they're probably going to get a lot more red zone rushing attempts and passing attempts with a better quarterback. So I think it's bad news for Knight to move to Zach Wilson, even if they're going to run more on a per play basis. The other thing is that I wasn't really super enthused about Knight this week, relative to his consensus ranking at least, because of the Lions' run defense. I know that's a shocking thing to be talking about. For the year in whole, they're the number one increaser of expected rushing touchdowns per game. So you're like, it doesn't seem that good of a run defense. But since early November, check out the Lions, what they've done to the top of the running backs they faced. Aaron Jones, 25 rushing yards, no touchdowns. Khalil Herbert, 57, no touch. Juan Barkley, 22, no touchdowns. Etienne, 34 yards, no touchdowns, 54. And then Dalvin Cook last week did score, but only 23 rushing yards. Seems like a big turning of the tide there. And this has coincided when the Lions have started winning games. And I think everybody's been giving Jared Goff that credit. Maybe looking at the offense where, the wide receivers are getting healthier. They're getting kind of their full offensive situation together. But their run defense has performed so much better. And to me, that makes me a little bit nervous. Not that you're necessarily going to bench Knight everywhere, but I have him outside the top 20 at running back. So I'm nervous this week for him.
No, I hear you. The defense has turned around a lot. You just gave some of those numbers, which is fantastic. I think if you look at them overall as a whole and you see fantasy points against, yards per carry, you're like, I'll start them. But this is a different Lions team from the start of the season. We've been drinking the Kool-Aid from day one, and that Kool-Aid it's nice. It's pretty tasty these days, especially if you're a Lions fan. Here's a question that we have from a Twitter handle, Twitter person here. It is I think Tim on Twitter. J.K. Dobbins against Cleveland, Cordero Patterson against the Saints, or Rachaad White versus Cincy. Pick one to play. Would it be as simple as J.K. Dobbins, or are you concerned that he's not completely healthy and it is going to be a bit of a committee this week against the Browns tomorrow, in fact?
So I do have Dobbins a little bit ahead of Rachaad, a little bit closer than you expect, because I feel like the workload split there in Baltimore is more even than you would expect too. Gus Edwards, I think, played about 40% of snaps last week too. I think it could be a little bit of a house divided there, but you're kind of in a similar spot with Rachaad White, with Leonard Fournette. I think the Bucs riding the hot hand a little bit more than the consensus would suggest. So I think you're okay with Dobbins there, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. I have Dobbins 26th among running backs.
Okay. So you're a little bit hesitant. Alex is in the house. Dobbins or Swift PPR?
I would start Swift there. I think the PPR makes the big swing, where Dobbins, even last year when he was healthier and integrated all season, It's just not really an offense where they throw a lot to their running backs. So I think that Swift could end up having 4 or 5 more catches. And so to me, that makes up for a bigger gap in rushing attempts. And I would side with Swift.
One more here from Lee. Healthy Damian Harris, if no Ramondre Stevenson, or would you side with any of these other running backs, Rachaad White, Mostert, or Jerick McKinnon? Because it does seem like maybe, Scott, that Damian Harris will take that backfield here with maybe Paris catching a couple passes out of the backfield. It does pain me to think about no Ramondre, but it does seem like he's trending in the wrong direction.
So I'll say that to me, Jerick McKinnon is the one that stands out here, as I don't want any part of him there. I think it's a real mistake to look at last week and say that this is going to be some kind of standard for him going forward. To me, that was hugely a matchup driven situation where the Titans have the best run defense in football, maybe the second or third best, and a dramatically worse pass defense than run defense. So that matchup to me screamed, hey, this is probably not going to be the week for Pacheco. He's going to throw it, check down to McKinnon, and it's going to produce that way. This week in the Texans, it's a totally different situation where they could blow them out and have a ton of run late in the game to kill clock. So I would say get McKinnon out of there. He's probably not in my top 35 or so running backs. Harris is a lot more compelling. I'm trying to look between Mostert and Rachaad White here to see which one I have better. But do you know if Jeff Wilson's playing this week? Because to me, that was an uncertainty too, right?
It's still kind of up in the air when it comes to Jeff Wilson. Let's assume he's out. That could play a little bit better. I'll double check here as you dive into it, but let's assume that there's no Jeff Wilson.
I'm still where? Okay, I have Raheem Mostert currently 30th, I believe, assuming that Wilson's going to miss. And it's tugging both ways. Cold weather up in Buffalo. That's good news for the run game for the Dolphins because they may run the ball more. But it's bad news that they're playing the Bills, who were a pretty good run defense too. So I have him 30th. To me, not really a slam dunk start. With the Patriots side of things, while Mac Jones has performed much better at home than on the road in his career, the Raiders are a top 5 booster of expected touchdown runs. So I think Damian Harris would probably score a touchdown in that spot if he was the primary back. I think I would roll with him. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Coming back, his backfield against the Raiders, what we've seen when he is healthy, he does get some of that work. I mean, no Ramondre, right? I don't think he's going to catch any passes, and I don't think the Raiders are going to blow out the Patriots where he's sitting a majority of the game. I just can't picture that game script happening that way. The Patriots defense is really good. They're among the leaders in sacks. Derek Carr and company, all they've done is getting in their own way this season with losses. So I would say that I'd say Damian Harris, man. If there's no Ramondre, I would lean with Harris. You still got White and Fournette getting into each other. I totally agree on your take on McKinnon versus Pacheco. And then Raheem Mostert, right? If it's his backfield, maybe he's getting just as many touches as Harris, but it's a better spot for Harris in a dome. Don't got to worry about the weather, moving the football, and things like that. So that's kind of where I'm at. Tyler had another one there just with Damian Harrison or flex Marquise and Juju. Let's hang on to that. We only have 3 more minutes here with Scott. We got a break, and I just want to get maybe one wide receiver that he likes, maybe more than consensus this week, and maybe one that he doesn't like as much. Or if there's a starter sit question, guys, leave it there. One more segment here with Scott. Hang tight, dude. We'll be back here in a couple. One more segment here with Scott Spratt. Really enjoying this. There's a lot of different moving pieces here on a Friday always. We don't have all of the news. Check out Scott's article. Check out the rankings. My rankings can be found there, ftnfantasy.com. I'm going to go ahead and answer the question, Tyler. I would play Juju over Damian Harris at flex. I'm not going to touch Marquise Brown with the quarterback situation, and I just don't really feel like a lot's going to happen there in that game against the Broncos. I'm going to take Juju. I'm just going to hope he scores a touchdown or two against the Texans and they get up early. And if he does sit in the second half, then you don't have to worry too much about it. But sometimes I do lean with that running back in the flex spot because of those guaranteed touches. I don't know how you feel about that, but unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time to get into your strategy when it comes to that. Wide receivers, Scott, we can throw up the projections. Left the top 12 off because they're all studs, but believe it or not, Garrett Wilson was inside that top 12. Albert, I know you had a Garrett Wilson question. We're not going to dive into it again. He's not going to be inside the top 12. That's for sure when we update our projections and our rankings, but you can go back and just watch the beginning of the show. We really dove into it. Scott had some good analysis and we did talk about Garrett Wilson. I still think I would play him, but I just don't view him as a high end or low end wide receiver one this week. Wide receivers, again, here you go, digging deep, page 3. I'll let you have the mic. Is there a guy you like maybe more than most or other way around, a guy that you don't like as much this week?
Yeah, Chris, you're saying that we're not going to get into this, but I am going to get into this because Juju Smith-Schuster is one of my least favorite guys this week relative where he's being ranked. Unable. The thing is, so Juju, he got hurt a few weeks ago, missed a game because of a concussion, right? He finally came back and looked healthy again, and that's great. But like suddenly people are thinking that he's the top option in this offense. I just don't see it. I mean, he's averaged 6.8 targets per healthy week so far this season. That's good. But like having that projection is like 33rd among wide receivers now that all the players are back. So to me, he's not as dominant a target share guy as that you might expect. And the other side of this is that the Texans, I think a lot of this is game script related, but it's also their pass defense is better than the run defense. And they're actually a cutter of expected passing touchdowns. They're top 7 in that actually in the league. So to me, Pacheco is the one that I'm like, this is probably a really good spot for him. And I'm sure Mahomes will be fine, but I don't think it's a great week to roll with Juju Smith-Schuster. He's not in my top 25 wide receivers this week.
So you'd play Damian Harris over him and just get those automatic touches, especially if there's no Ramondre?
I think I would. Assuming that Stevenson is out, I think I would.
This is a tough one. Waddle or Pacheco? KC running back? KC running back?
Yeah. I'm not sure my rankings would totally support this, but off the cuff answer is Pacheco. Right? He's been top 5 among running backs over the last month in red zone touches, and he just hasn't quite scored as much as you would expect. But how could he not score against the Texans this week? It's like ultimate trap game, but I literally can't even imagine how he doesn't.
I agree. Set bet spike is going to come your way a little bit later on. It's going to be one of my touchdown calls. And I know I'm not breaking any news here, but double-digit carries against this defense, double-digit point favorites here. You mentioned, they have been good against quarterbacks, and part of it is game script, of course, but it's a pass-happy offense. But I would imagine he's getting some run in the second half of this football game. Scott, you're fantastic, man. Absolutely love chopping it up with you. Thank you so much for taking the time here and all the questions that are on the fly. I know people are probably going to watch a little bit later on or listen on iTunes. If you want to reach out to Scott_Spratt on the Twitter machine, and then check out all of his work, start and sit, pace calling report, touchdown luck, rankings. It's all there over at ftnfantasy.com. And twice a week, right? Advanced stats. Early in the week and then a little bit later on in the week. That's right.
Comes out Tuesday, waiver wire, Friday with a fantasy game preview. Appreciate the plugs, Chris.
Absolutely love it. We'll say goodbye to Scott right now, and we will turn our attention to some picks against the spread, also some props for this weekend as well. We'll be back in a couple.
I can't say enough about what we've got going on over at FTNBets.com.
At FTN Bets, your bankroll can be profitable. With the FTN Bet Tracker, you can tell your favorite experts across all sports, including the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball.
Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. I'm your host, Chris Meaney.
And with our premium content, you can take your bets to the next level. Only $49.99 a month. tools the pros use at FTN. Our betting models run over 100,000 simulations of every game, with sides and totals in the NFL, the NBA, and more. Use the home run predictor to see who'll hit a bomb deep. Our NFL player projections will make you a DFS king. And the FTN Prop Shop always finds the best odds for your player props. All tools, projections, and models are powered by FTN Data.
I can't say enough about what we've got going on over at FTNBets.com.
At FTN Bets, your bankroll can be profitable. With the FTN Bet Tracker, you can tell your favorite experts across all sports, including the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball.
Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. I'm your host, Chris Meaney.
And with our premium content, you can take your bets to the next level. Only $49.99 a month. Use the tools the pros use at FTN. Our betting models run over 100,000 simulations of every game, with sides and totals in the NFL, the NBA, and more. Use the home run predictor to see who'll hit a bomb deep. Our NFL player projections will make you a DFS king. And the FTN Prop Shop always finds the best odds for your player props. All tools, projections, and models are powered by FTN Data.
Tyler, breaking news for us on the show. Jerry Jones says OBJ is expected to join the Cowboys for the upcoming playoff run. Well, you better be ready to go come week one, bud, because that's all the Cowboys are come. Well, I can't even chirp them. I'm bummed. I wanted to say that it doesn't matter because the boys are going to be done in the first matchup. They're going to lose to the Bucs, and that's it. It's over. OBJ is not going to play. We're going to see him next year. I don't really know how much he has to offer. Like, he's not going to play at all in the regular season? Then you're just going to insert this guy into the playoffs? He's going to be very limited, but to have OBJ on the field certainly does. You got to focus on him. You got to pay attention to him. It opens up some things for some other guys. So a little bit bitter there, eh, Tyler? I mean, whatever. The Eagles and the Giants, they don't need him. Giants do need him a little bit more than the Cowboys do. Speaking of the NFC East, I do have a prop here for you. Devontae Smith. There's a lot here that I like, actually. I'm going to share a couple more with you after this one. But Devontae Smith, I've been going to this guy over the past couple weeks. 4.5 catches plus money over at DraftKings. Prop Shop is your friend to get the best possible odds. This guy's open all the time. He really is. When I rewatch Eagles games like a psycho, I just see this guy open all the time. 8+ targets in 5 straight games. 5+ catches in 4 of those games. The Bears have allowed 8 touchdowns to wide receivers over the last 5 games. They don't have a lot to offer defensively. So I am going to ride with Devontae Smith over 4.5 grabs. And I like his receiving yard prop as well. As we see, here's a couple other props that I like on the board. Some are just surfacing now. Check out Set Bet Spike a little bit later on. FTNBets.com/free. Sign up for free and get all of these picks and everybody else's picks over at FTN across all the sports projections tools, you name it. Smith, 55.5 receiving yards. I think he's going to get 5 grabs, so I think he's going to get the receiving yards. 166 over the past 2 weeks. He's topped this number in 3 of his last 4 games. Jalen Hurts, minus 130 for 2 touchdown passes. He's thrown at least 2 touchdown passes in 3 straight games in 7 of his past 8 games. He's been a touchdown machine lately through the air. Decent odds here. Derrick Henry, we talk about Derrick Henry every week in his receiving yard props, so don't really need to dive into that, but he's having a career year in terms of receiving yards. The game plan, of course, is always Derrick Henry. You can run all over the Chargers, but maybe just 1 or 2 catches. I'm seeing a screen pass, at least 2 screen passes to him basically every single game, and it only takes 1 for him to get to 14 receiving yards. We have him for 22 receiving yards in our projections. Mike Williams, man, this guy is boom or bust. Clearly, 8 full games this season. He's topped 100 yards in 4 of his 8 games, including last week when he returned 6 grabs and 116 yards. 5 of the 8 games he has topped this number. Definitely boom or bust. I totally get it. But the Titans secondary is atrocious. We've seen teams over the past couple weeks. The Eagles lit him up. And then last week, the Jacksonville Jaguars lit him up as well. Donovan Peoples-Jones over 3.5 grabs, one of our favorites here on the show. 12 targets, 8 grabs, and 114 yards last week with Deshaun Watson. The second full game with Watson, he dusted off a little bit of that rust. And Amari Cooper is dealing with a bit of a hip thing. I would still play Cooper. I think he's fine. It sounds like he's going to be good to go. But Donovan Peoples-Jones for over 3.5 grabs. And one more segment here. We've got 30 seconds or so to show you a couple spreads, totals, and a nice little teaser for you as well on the way out. Keep her locked. One final block here. If you're looking for some hockey picks, ftnbets.com/free. Tyler, let's check it up. Let's check up some picks against the spread. Left side, Chargers by a field goal. I don't care if Brady's been lucky or not. The Bengals to 3.5. Lucky or unlucky, I don't know. I get it. Scott brought up some really good points. I think Brady could have a decent day, but I'm going with Cincinnati here on the spread. Dallas as well, 4.5. I'm just trying not to overthink this too much. I think Dallas is the better squad. You always got the potential of a look ahead here. Mika Parsons is running his mouth and Jalen Hurts, yada, yada. Dallas will take care of business this weekend against Jacksonville. Meaney and Cincy are my 2 teams, as you see in the parlay. Cincy, Meaney, Dallas, and Philly. I really feel like Cincy on the money line is fine, even though it's like minus 200. My upsets would be New England and Detroit, because New England just, the Raiders just get in their own way all the time. So I'm going to take the better defense, the better coach team in New England. Josh McDaniels against Bill Belichick. Honestly, Bill Belichick against his his coaching staff. Are you kidding me? I'm going to take New England here. Philly in the over, and nothing happening in Arizona, Denver, Pittsburgh, or Carolina in the teaser at the end. Good luck this weekend with all your picks. Check out the FTN betting show, Set Bet Spike as well. Lots of content over at our FTN Network YouTube page. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. Cheers.